Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again for another virtual Dream Palace session. I think we're on number 12 now. It's been an epic journey through the world of sleeping and dreaming, and I am delighted about our guest this evening, Daniel Oldis. Daniel and I have actually been in touch. I don't know when I got in touch with you, Daniel. It seems like a decade ago or something. When I was,
Well,
it
yeah, a
was a
few
long
years.
time ago, quite a few years ago. I was looking into some of Daniel's research. Daniel is a dream scientist and a researcher who works in sleep labs doing sort of practical, technical, scientific studies of people whilst they're dreaming. And we had a discussion about some research into recording dream speech. And because I've been interested in dreaming since I was a child, I've kind of read everything and seen everything to do with dreaming. There's not many things in the world of dreaming that surprise me. But Daniel's research he was describing was about using electromyography to try to record dream speech, because when you're dreaming and you're talking in a dream, your voice box is actually making the micro movements associated with particular words. So if we could somehow capture those movements, we may be able to reverse engineer the speech that you're giving in your dream. You might not want to know what you're saying to people in dreams or what's being said to you, but I thought it was absolutely fascinating. And that night when I went to bed, I had a dream. I became lucid in it, and I was standing in Times Square in New York. And so I started to shout really loudly, "This is amazing." And I could feel my voice box making the movements associated with saying these words. And it was a really interesting experience. And one other thing I had a kind of epiphany about is, if a lot of people, when they have nightmares, scream in their dreams, and they can scream really, really loudly, but all that comes out is a tiny little squeak. And I think that is probably the sleeping body being aware that the voice box is attempting to make those movements associated with the screaming, but perhaps not fully realizing them. So I thought that was a really, really fascinating area of research. And Daniel's also going to tell us today about communication from between dreamers, from a dreamer to an observer in a lab, I think. Some techniques about dream recording, some new research into how to induce lucid dreaming reliably. So I'm sure you will find this an extremely interesting session, and a session not really like anything else we've had so far. So Daniel, I would like to hand over to you now. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to your presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Hope everybody can hear me. So most of this PowerPoint slides are related to dream recording. I had a brief discussion with Sarah about some lucid dream things going on around the world, and a little bit about dream-to-dream communication. I don't be using technology between two dreamers, very, very rudimentary dream communication. But if somebody wants to hear about that at the end, let me know when we open up, and we can talk a little bit about that, because that's sort of exciting too. This presentation is focused on recording dreams and playing them back, of course. Your dream may be coming to the theater near you, or at least the YouTube near you in a few years to come. But I got interested in recording dreams. It was about 10 years ago. I was reading an article about some research in Japan that was doing some very basic recording of dream visual imagery. And I thought, that completely new to me. Dreams always seem like the most hidden, private thing in the world, and we'll never actually record them. And of course, we may not want to record them. We're going to talk about some pros and cons of dream recording. But I was very excited to read this. But I also realized that dreams are a lot more than just visual imagery, right? I think one study had like 80% of dreams have verbal content. So we talk in dreams, we have conversations in dreams. So speech in dreams and conversations in dreams is a big part of dreaming for a large number of people. And we also have our dream body movements. We walk, we wave, we run. Some of us can fly, we dance. So the body is active in dreams. So to try to get a more forward picture, I thought, well, let's see, it would be great if we could do the visual imagery, the dream speech, the body movement. And so that was my interest got going on that. It's still very early stages, you know, we're not going to be able to flip on our computers and review our dreams every morning for quite a while, but there's, you know, steps are being taken. So, you know, it's just like the American Apollo mission to the moon. It's one step at a time, right? Baby steps. So anyway, this is a sort of a review of the research. Most of the research is done by other folks. Some of it was done by me and a group at the University of Texas. So let's get going. If I'm going too fast or too slow, Sarah, maybe you could just slow me down or speed me up.
Sure, will do.
Yeah, for some reason, hang on a minute here. I am going to have to stop sharing a minute.
Try just using the arrow keys. That usually works.
Let's see what's going on with my PowerPoint was not going down. Now there it goes. Okay, now hang on. I'm going to try one more time to share and then see if start up my PowerPoint again. It wouldn't let me go down. I think I'll do the whole desktop this time. Maybe that'll work.
Yeah, I usually find that is better as well.
Okay. So now let me go to my PowerPoint. There we go. Can you see that now? I'm moving around?
Yep.
Okay, good. Okay. So I didn't see this till sometime after it was made, but I related to it while I was working on this topic. But there was a movie in 1991 by Wim Wenders, who had won some awards for some of his movies in Europe and in America. And this was called Until the End of the World. And it was like a 4-hour movie. It was basically like a road movie. But a part of it was about recording dreams. And this group in, I think it was South Africa, had developed the technology to record dreams. And then the dreamer could play it back the next day on like electronic tablets, just like iPads. And this was way before iPads were even thought of. So the movie was pretty prescient in even just using tablets, right? So people could watch their dreams and hear their dreams. And the next day, the problem was in the movie, people got addicted to it. That's all they wanted to do was to watch their dreams all day long. They didn't eat. They didn't socialize. They would just zone out like a drug and watch their dreams over and over and over. And the lower right-hand picture there is one of the images that I think it was William Hurt was in the movie. One of the images that he saw in a dream, and so the movie implied that this was could be sort of a dangerous drug, recording our dreams, and we could get hooked on them just like we would any kind of a drug possible. And so the movie, I related to the movie because it was I thought it was a fascinating take. If you have a chance to see it, and if you have 4 hours to spare on the movie, you may want to take a look at it. Oh, hang on here. Okay, so here's the topics I'm going to be talking about. So what is meant by recording dreams in this presentation? Excuse me. And lowering the bar of expectations. We're not going to be watching Gone with the Wind or Wizard of Oz or Godfather. We're not going to have that kind of a clarity or that kind of a detail. So we want to make sure we understand our expectations, just like once again, like I talked about the American Apollo trip to the moon. You have to start out with baby steps. So what tech is involved? We're going to talk about that. So a brief history of dream recording foundations. Mostly this is physiology and technology since the 1960s, actually. Various pieces that allow for dream recording today. So these are the foundational elements of dream recording. We're going to talk about dream imagery decoding and reconstruction, dream speech and conversation reproduction, dream motor behavior, reconstruction and simulation. And this is what I was sort of involved in more detail, the dream body movement, reconstruction and simulation. And then we're going to talk about recording dreams, the challenges, the benefits, and the risks involved. One of those risks could people feel that surveillance, if you can record your own dream, what's stopping somebody else from stealing your dream, like hacking it, or even passive restraint, or while you're zonked out, somebody records your dream. So we'll talk about some of those benefits and risks. So we have to narrow the scope of this a little bit. So when I speak of recorded dreams, I'm talking basically about the reconstruction of nocturnal dreams into digital media. And so it's not old, millimeter film, this is digital media. And we're going to talk about the visual imagery in dreams. It seems to be the most salient aspect of dreams, but there's a lot more going on in dreams. The dream body movements in dreams, speech and conversations with characters in dreams. We're not going to talk, however, about the feelings and emotions. Those are would be very hard to capture. And they're a powerful part of dreams, of course. But one of the goals is that if we get to the point where you can record your own dream, it will hopefully give you cues to remember the dream in more detail. You may see some of your dream, oh yeah, I remember being there. And then the emotion will come back, hopefully. You'll be able to relive the emotion, just like if you can recall a dream in the morning, you often very much so recall the emotions and the feelings that go with it. So hopefully dreams will help motivate that memory, recalling dreams. And even if somebody else were to watch your dream, it would be like watching a movie. We don't actually feel the characters' emotions. We're not inside the movie actors, right? But we can relate to it. So we empathize with it. We sympathize and empathize with it. And we develop our own emotional response to movie events and movie plots, right? Even though we're just watching somebody else do it, we're not inside their bodies or in their minds. We still, it can still evoke our emotions. And so somebody else watching your dream could work that same way. And the other thing we'll not be talking about, and I have not seen too much research yet, is the ambient audio in dreams. Like if in a dream you hear thunder, or if you're in a dream you hear music. These would be very challenging to record, although not impossible, because as we know, the auditory part of the brain can be mapped, when we're listening to music, right? And even the impulses in the inner ear, the fine muscles of the inner ear, when we listen to something in a dream, are actually activated. So there will be techniques that in the future will allow us to hear ambient sounds, the seashore, thunder, music. So that will come about, but that's not in this initial dive into this process. Okay, hang on a minute. Okay, so we want to set the expectations for dream recording. The early dream recordings are not going to win any Oscars for cinematography. They're going to be very rough, just like that picture in the movie with William Hurt was in the first slide. Pretty fuzzy, right? At least initially. Very grainy. So they're not going to win any cinematography, but they may pick up best screenplay if you got an interesting dream. Many people have amazing, intricate storylines in their dream. And so we can record those. In a sense, that's a screenplay. Your sleeping mind is creating the story, right? Creating the narrative, just as if you were to sit down and write a script. So, in theory, a screenplay may be possible. This is a dance we used to do. I don't know if they did this all over the world, but when I was growing up in America, we had a thing called the limbo. And it's, although you can get under a pole without falling back on your head. And it was a lot of fun to do, very hard. But the bar was setting those expectations. So I use the limbo here as the image here to keep those expectations of, fairly low, and see if we can get under that bar. Okay, so the tech that has been involved so far, and I'm sure there's stuff going on I don't know about, so other tech may be coming into play. Most people are familiar with MRIs that are used in medical applications, MRI machines. They are coming down in size. It used to be these big, huge tunnels, right, in hospitals, and now they have portable ones that are sort of open-ended that you can actually have at home. The functional aspect of MRI is the special kind of imagery that can detect patterns in the brain that correspond to thoughts, visual imagery, auditory, body movements, all the different parts of the brain that are involved in life, in normal activities. So the functional can capture those functional images and functional aspects of the brain, and that can correspond to other outside events and thoughts, concepts even, and language. The other thing, electroencephalography, EEG, most of you probably heard of this term. This is the stuff that we're on the scalp, detects electrical activity of different parts of the brain. And when they talk in dreams about REM dreams, EEG is a big aspect of measuring that. You hear the terms alpha waves, beta waves, delta waves, which in delta waves, like in deep sleep, you see more of that activity. Theta waves, beta waves, maybe in dreams. So many people are familiar with that concept of the EEG and how those technologies are used in a variety of applications to measure electrical activity of the brain. Electromyography is one I've been more involved with. And this is sensors placed on the muscle areas of the body. It could be arms, legs, the throat, the face, anywhere in the body. And it could detect, and Sarah sort of alluded to this, it could detect minute impulses going to the muscles corresponding to dream behavior. So mostly we're paralyzed in sleep. If you look at somebody sleeping in bed or even dreaming, they're zonked out, right? They're not moving. So, but the term paralyzed is a little misleading because the electrical signals are still going from the brain and spinal cord into the muscles. They're just not normally strong enough to make you move in bed. Or sometimes it is. People were jerked or something if they're trying to catch something in a dream. REM behavior disorder, people get up and move around, although that's not always related strictly to normal activity that most people have. It's considered sort of a disorder. But in any case, the sensors can pick up a minute muscle impulse activity through electromyography. Functional near infrared spectroscopy, I always have a hard time with that word, spectroscopy. That is similar to MRI in the sense that it tends to measure blood flow. So when there are any neurons in the brain are showing any activity, the blood will go there to those neurons. And so near infrared is another mechanism to measure brain neuron activity, primarily through oxygen and hemoglobin in the blood. So that's something that's being used. That's very portable. It's the one here I'm showing is even more portable now. Now it's just a little strap going around your head with a little bar around your forehead or the back of your head. So it's not even those multiple electrodes. So that's becoming more portable. And then, of course, the algorithms involved, the software involved, neural nets, machine learning, and coming soon, more artificial intelligence will be involved with recording dreams. The big challenge for AI is to get enough volume of data about dreams and associated physiological markings of dreams, speech, visual, motor behavior. So you need a large data set for artificial intelligence to take advantage of that. But that will be coming. So AI, I think, will become more and more involved with dream recording and other aspects of dream too. Okay, it's a short history of research that has been foundational to dream recording. So in the 1960s, some research disclosed that there was a correspondence with dream body movement and actual physical body muscle activity, and pretty much using electromyography here. So that if you walk in a dream, the impulses are going to your legs and can be measured by the sensors. If you wave to somebody, the impulses are going to your arm or your hand. If you speak or smile in a dream, the impulses are going to your facial and speech muscles. So this was discovered way back then, that there is that correspondence. In the 1970s, it was disclosed that there's also a correspondence with dream speech and dream muscle activity. So there's actually, when you talk in a dream, it was verified that the speech muscles were activated that relate to the act of speaking in a dream or conversations in a dream. One interesting thing with this is that even if the other characters in the dream talk to you, not the ego or the I of the dream, but the other characters in the dream, the speech muscles also show activities. So it's sort of like ventriloquism. Our bodies are moving for the other character in the dream when they're speaking. So it is a sort of like a form of ventriloquism. I thought that's very interesting, that we can measure not just the primary ego character of the dream, but also the other characters at times when they're speaking to us in the dream. In the 1980s, lucid dream motor behavior and dream conversation mapping. So they were able to map that people would do some body movement in dreams, and that was specific body movement, and that could be represented both through NIRS technology and EMG, electromyography technology, that the body movement can be related directly to the what the sensors are picking up. So if you wave in the dream, you can see that part of the brain of motor behavior. You can see the activity related to the waving of the hand, and that dream conversations that both the main character and the other characters in the dream can be mapped, as I was mentioning earlier. So that was in the 80s. In the 2000s, the visual imagery starts to come into play. Internal visual imagery decoding and silent speech recognition. So the visual decoding, that's when they could start reconstructing imagery in the mind that people in the lab viewed while they were awake. So if they look at images of a dog, of a tree, of a house, of a mountain, the technology could reconstruct that. In other words, it could detect later, when they were asked just to imagine what they were viewing, they could reconstruct what was going on in the brain. They could reconstruct the house or the mountain, right, or the tree. Very, very, very rudimentary. So they were able to start mapping both while somebody was viewing a picture or a video. They could map what was going on in the brain, and they could reconstruct it later, or even just imagining a visual image could be reconstructed. And in the 2010s, going back to silent speech recognition. Now, this is not what we could call strictly dream speech. While people are awake, if they're not actually talking, but if you have the EMG sensors placed, and if they're just making the movement of talking or just thinking about talking, in their mind, silent speech, sometimes called covert speech, this could be mapped using EMG. We could detect that silent speech when somebody is awake, but not actually speaking out loud. So that was important. That was in the 2000s. Okay. In the 2010s, along comes dream imagery reconstruction. Now, this is the groups in Japan have been most influential in this aspect, actually recreating some imagery from a dream. So not while they're awake and viewing some images or viewing a video or imagining viewing a picture, but while they're dreaming. So that was the first time that dream imagery was coming into play, as well as the previous research on waking imagery. And then in the 2020s, we have facial imagery recognition. We can recreate faces that we've seen during the day or faces that we dream about, so it's become a lot more, much more precise, relative speaking, where other people, facial imagery, both that we may be watching while we're awake or dreaming, is now coming into play. And actual dream speech decoding on a very rudimentary level. What were we saying in the dream? We can, in the 60s, they knew that these impulses are going to the speech muscles, but they did not know what the dreamer was saying, what the conversation was. So that's just starting now, and it has some success with actual dream speech decoding. Okay, so here's some examples. So this is facial imagery reconstruction. So this is real-time reconstruction of imagined facial images from EEG activity, not even MRI. Now, these subjects were awake, so this is not directly from a dream, but still going on in the brain, in the same areas of the brain that we use when we're dreaming. So the same visual areas of the brain are used when we're dreaming as when we're awake. But these images were recreated from visual imagery perception and then recreated from brain activity. So you can see the left, right, the ones on the right are the computer recreation. A lot of them are pretty close. So there's been quite a bit of advancement in brain imagery, visual imagery reconstruction. Okay, here's some early foundations of internal visual imagery decoding. Now, these particular ones were from waking subjects, viewing imagery or videos, or bringing to mind, reimagining an image, a visual image, a picture, or a video. And you can see it pretty rough. This is back in the early 2000s on the left there. Looks a little bit like that, the one we saw in the movie with Wim Wenders' movie, with this fuzziness, right? And then on the top, you can see certain letters are captured in the brain reconstruction of those letters on top, neuron. And at the bottom, I think that's a fly or something, a moth. And how the brain on the right, the reconstruction from brain activity tries to approximate what the person was imagining or viewing. Hope that makes sense. So this is the remembered object. So in this case, the subject is reimagining something and trying to bring it back into their mind, and then the brain activity is being captured. Okay, so these are coming from reconstructions from a dream and from brain activity. very rudimentary. On the left, it looks like somebody is dreaming of some kind of a building. The right one is one of my favorites. This little puppy. It's like you almost want to take him around the block for a walk, you know. And so these are visual images captured from the brain, the visual area called the V1 area of the brain during a dream. And you can see we're still a very rough, like I keep expectations low, very rough, but these are the steps. These are the baby steps to where we want to get to. I don't have a name for this little dog, but I would like to name him myself maybe. Okay, this is just a sort of a schematic of how dream imagery decoding using deep neural networks, a form of artificial intelligence work. So you have your input, your fMRI activity. Well, it's a big database of other dreams, right? You collect dreams from many, many, many people, images from the brains of many, many people, and create a database. And then using that, you try to map common visual objects to a reconstruction, try to predict what the person was dreaming about using neural networks. So this is where the more volume of data you can acquire, physiological data, brain activity data from MRI, from near infrared, from EEG, and from electromyography, the more you can build up that database throughout various populations that have a lot of common features actually across populations for like brain activity when you see a red ball, for example, or a star or a flower. There's a lot of commonality. So you want to build up that database. So this is just a schematic of that. So silent interspeech recognition, this is the dream foundations that have been done. So they've been able to reconstruct on the top left some speech from fMRI brain scan. So this would be when people are speaking or thinking about speaking. On the right, EEG has been used to create very basic reconstructions of speech when you just think about it. So you think about, I'm going to the movies. Very, very short, you know, very basic sentences. EEG can often reconstruct what you're thinking about. And these applications like this are starting to be used for people with different disabilities, right? They could just start thinking what they want to say. And hopefully as years go by, the technology will convert this to audio and that you can communicate with a person who has, say, lost their ability to speak. There's a lot of research going on is really invasive. In other words, electrodes in the brain, which has had quite a bit of success. But for dream recording, on a normal nightly basis, I don't think we probably don't want to drill into our heads. So I'm focusing on the non-invasive stuff that can be done on the surface. I think that's going to be easier for all of us. Rather than for dream recorder, rather than any kind of implantable device. So in the bottom part there, this is early work on silent speech. That they've had good luck with people thinking about speaking or speaking silently and converting that to words and sentences. So you can see the electromyography, the EMG sensors, trying to convert those to words, phrases, and sentences by just speaking the word silently or thinking about the word. I was involved with this research. This is once again part of dream speech. And this was at the University of Texas Sleep Lab, where the EMG sensors, you could see the dream speech episode there. And then we try to match that in a sense to phonemes, the speech activity of the various muscles. So those muscles, those sensors are on, we try to map those when you're speaking in a dream or another character speaking, but I'm usually focused on the main character. Very difficult to do. Some, small success, very interesting things. Some of the speech, like you could detect if somebody got angry with somebody, because they tend to speak louder in the dream, and had more luck with sometimes when people are angry in dreams than when they're just talking normal conversation. But so that is part of the dream speech. Very rudimentary, you know. This is more recent. This is being done in Russia. A group in Russia has been able to capture specific phrases in dreams and map them to audio. And actually, the audio speaks out what the dreamer was saying in the dream. In this case, the dreamer in the dream said, "I love you." The top part is when "I love you" is spoken while you're awake. The bottom part is when "I love you" was spoken in a REM dream. As you can see, the patterns are similar. The volume or the amplitude is much weaker. And that's because the speech muscles receive diminished impulses from the brain. Most of the impulses are inhibited by the brain, but there are subliminal covert impulses that do get to the speech muscles, and these can be measured by EMG. So the bottom part is the dream version of saying, "I love you." And so that is quite a good advancement, because now you have to move there to full sentences, you know, and there's a big challenge also. There's a lot of words just in English, right? So you have to train the software on either on the phoneme level, the sound level, in a sense, or the word level, or the sentence level. So you can't predict every kind of sentence possible, right? So they focus more on the individual syllable or phrase or phoneme level. Big challenges, but small successes along the way. Okay, so there's a couple there with dream speech. So dream motor behavior, we run in dreams, we dance, we sometimes kick. Some of us can fly. We wave, we walk, you know, we do all the body movements that we do while we're awake. And using electromyography, or in this case, near infrared, NIRS, we can reconstruct what those movements are in the dream, either by looking at the corresponding brain activity that correspond to these body movements, correlate to these body movements through brain activity, or through EMG, centers on the body muscles themselves. So that was using brain activity to try to map it and reconstruct. And this is using electromyography. I was involved with some of these experiments. So with the sensors on these areas of the brain. And then my brother actually is a graphics programmer. Actually, from direct mapping, capturing the data elements, the data points from the dream muscle activity, mapping them to an avatar in a graphics program, you could start actually simulating with a video avatar what a person was doing in the dream as far as motor behavior, as far as body movement. So you can actually watch what a person was doing in a dream. And you can even see if they're speaking. In these experiments, you can't say what they're saying, but you can see the mouth moving. So on the right here is one of the avatars we have. And this is out there in my academia site. If you go to academia and search Daniel Oldis, I think I had my direct link up on top there. You can see some of this more detail, and it will give you a link to the animation. So using electromyography, we map different muscles to a video avatar using graphic software, and we can watch the animation of what the sleeping subject was doing in the dream. In this case, mostly walking, waving the hands, speaking, so forth. So that is another main element of dream recording. So we talked about the visual imagery aspect, the speech aspect, body movement aspect. Okay, so those are the three main tech areas. As we said, we can't yet map emotions in dreams or ambient sounds in dreams. But you can see there has been some steps that can capture dream visual imagery and reconstruct it, can capture dream speech and reconstruct it on a very rudimentary level, and dream body movement that can be reconstructed in video. So let's see, I'm getting on time here, 10:43, that's not bad. Okay, so the big challenge is to move forward with this. And there's a group at Donders, I believe, in the Netherlands, I've communicated with, is moving forward with some of these different research projects. And so things are moving, but it's slow. A lot of it is funding, right? It's tough to get funded for dreams because much of the world sees dreams as not a key element of life. Sometimes they're somewhat relegated to something is just non-practical, just a private thing that doesn't really is not important in life. So it's tough to get funding compared to getting funding for medical research or other types of research, even to research for cosmology or even to research that enable technology to go to Mars gets lots of funding, but to go to inner space, into the inner space of dreams, it's much tougher. Anyway, some of the challenges, it needs to become more generic. In other words, the software difficult to train the software on every possible image, right, that you could see in life so that you can reconstruct it in a dream in every sentence or word, every body movement, so those things now, which can be more subject specific and even dream specific, have to become, the software needs to be, and the database needs to be larger, and the software more trained on more generic models so that the training cycle to train the software for each dreamer is much shorter, so that you have a process before you go to sleep, and it may run you through a training cycle, asking you to imagine different images, speaking different things, moving a little bit, and then you go to sleep, and then that would train the software that could then be used later to reconstruct. So we need to get that software down so it's more generic, not only within one person and different dreams they may have, but between across populations. So that if you train it for one person, it will work for another person, or pretty close. Generic database, generic software. Hardware needs to get smaller. We're not gonna go every night down to sleep in an MRI to record our dreams. It would not be comfortable. It would be expensive, right? So we won't. We won't be using an MRI at home for a while, although near infrared, NIRS, and EEG are becoming much more portable. Even though sleeping with EEG or NIRS can be sort of uncomfortable, but even that, and there's even some lucid dream masks, that are becoming more comfortable to wear that have EEG in them, like the NeuroSky used to, the Zeo headgear. So things are becoming better and more portable and more comfortable. So private and public grantors must consider dreams as valuable projects, right? We talked about the funding for dreams to do research that needs to increase. People need to see value in dreams for this kind of a research. There's a story about a director was telling Sam Goldwyn of MGM that he had a great idea for a movie. He just needs $50,000. He says, "What do you think?" And Sam Goldwyn says, "What's the movie about?" He goes, "It's about dreams." And Sam Goldwyn says, "I think you just wasted $50,000." No, in other words, and this was back in the 60s, I think. So dreams are becoming more popular and more acknowledged as something worthwhile and valuable in lives, but I think it still needs a way to go, especially with the funding grantors, both public and private. The affordability. So if people want to use this dream recording technology nightly, it has to be something that everybody can afford. We need it to be equitable. We can't just have people who are rich enough to afford the technology to be able to record their dreams, but we need it available and affordable for everybody. So that's another goal and a challenge ahead. Okay, so benefits and risks, and I'm sure you folks out there could probably think of other ones I haven't thought of. But dream recording may be a great tool for recall. So watching your dream and listening to your dream speech in the morning on your computer or your laptop or your phone may trigger those memories and help trigger more recall, improve recall. Just by watching your dream, maybe remember that, oh yeah, that brings that, now I remember. Then you can follow through with the rest of it, and also the emotions that you had, right? So dream recording may assist therapists, the doctor, the therapist, and the patient, or the client, whatever term you want to use, sit down together, go through your dream on the video, hear what you're saying, possibly hear what other characters are saying, see what your body movement was in the dream. And if they're involved with psychoanalysis or dream interpretation, you have it right there in front of you. You're not relying on the narratives that the client is telling you after the fact. We can also sit down and view it together, watch the dream, and slow it down, fast forward, reverse, replay, so that way you can go over that as far as therapy goes. Okay, the risks. Dreams could be hacked. They're digital. Somebody could steal your dream or ransom them. You might not want every dream out there posted to Facebook or YouTube for the world to see, right? So there's that risk. You'd be ransomed, right? If you want your dream back, you don't want anybody to see it, you better pay me. And one that people have brought up many times, surveillance. Dream recording could be coerced, actually. So from a government standpoint, from maybe a worthwhile standpoint, like with terrorists, instead of torture, maybe a less invasive method would be record their dream. They're going to have to go to sleep sometime, right? Sooner or later, you're going to fall asleep. Record their dream may give you insight or clues to the intelligence you're looking for, right? But on the downside, if the government can record a terrorist dreams, depending on the government, they could be knocking on your door at home. You're going to have to fall asleep sometime. They can just restrain you. You're going to fall asleep and record your dream. And maybe it's like in the movie Minority Report. If you, in the future, if you should have a dream that they consider socially unacceptable or violates their government ideology, you could be arrested. So like pre-thought arrest, like arresting somebody for thinking about something. In this case, you could be put away for dreaming about something that somebody else doesn't want you dreaming about, or they think you're a potential criminal or weirdo or shooter. You know what I mean? So there could be some good things about it, but it also could be used in a negative way, as everything has both positive and negative. Okay, so that leaves us, I think about, here's my references if anybody wants to look at those quickly. These are also be recording this session, so you'll be able to look at those. You can also go to my academia website. I think it's a very interesting area. As I said, keeping expectations low. You can see that there has been small steps for recording dreams. It will still be a while before you can do this at home. Okay, so we got right about amount of time. We got almost 10 minutes or so, a little less for any questions. So, and I hope I can answer them. I probably can't answer all of them, but.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was absolutely fascinating, really interesting. I'm sure lots of people have got questions for you. Jen, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I have two. So I'll start with one and then see if there's time for another one. So the UT study at the sleep lab, right? I live in Austin, so I remember when the story came out, and my partner and I were really interested in finding out more. And we were wondering if, the Army Futures is also based here in Austin, and we're wondering if there was any sort of linkage or if there's any like interest on their part, from Army Futures in this kind of research. I mean, talking about funding and utility of such things. So wondering if you had any insights. Maybe I'm being conspiratorial, but wondering if the government or the Army had been looking into this at all too.
Well, I haven't personally been contacted, but I think the government. I did interview a retired Air Force intelligence officer and a retired general, and the retired general thought that this could be great for interrogation techniques and so forth. And the Army intelligence officer says dream recording is the worst thing could happen, because he said, believe me, they'll come knocking on your bedroom someday, and surveillance of your dream. So I had different opinions from people in the military, but I was never contacted by that group. And I'm sure that DARPA, is probably doing something. They're just probably not letting it, be public. I know that they have been involved with dream research before with Moran Surf. I think he's up at Northwestern. They've been involved with influencing content of dreams, and also some implantable recording of dream content using electrodes implanted in the brain. So there has been some DARPA involvement, Defense Department involvement with dream research. I haven't personally been contacted by anything, but I'm sure something is probably going on. You have another question?
Yeah, my second one, I'm sorry if anybody else wanted to ask. How were these studies designed at UT? What kind of consent did the subjects have to give? And so I'm just curious, like I would love to be a research study. And so what's involved when you go into that kind of research as a study participant?
Well, in this case, it was non-invasive. Of course, we use electromyography in the studies I was involved in. They may have more studies going on now. And of course, it has to pass the ethic review, ethic review boards. And so I'm sure I wasn't involved with the paperwork, but I'm sure it's probably the general release, especially since and also for the privacy of their dreams that they released, at certain aspects of the dream. In this case, it was body movement in the dream. It could be shared for academic purposes. I know the ethics reviews now, even in the group in Netherlands, are taking sometimes a year just to get something passed, so that you have the proper consent and stuff like that. And that's a good point, though, especially when you get more and more into the visual imagery decoding and more speech decoding. There's much more private aspects of that you would definitely want to have your consent all laid out.
Thank you.
Thoughts, yeah. If somebody else has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's an amazing idea, isn't it? I kind of would hate my dreams to be. I mean, part of my interest in dreams as a child was I wanted to create dream films. I wanted to be a film director, and I just wanted to be able to record my dreams so I could play them. But certainly there are some dreams that you would never want to ever watch yourself again or have an audience for. And I think there's probably a kind of safety mechanism within us as well that perhaps prevents us from remembering some of these things as well. So I do wonder about the psychological impact of, say, for example, a nightmare or a kind of buried trauma that resurfaces in dreams, but we're not especially conscious of, how that might impact someone. Have you had any experiences with any of your participants having negative dream experiences and being triggered by whatever recording is produced from that experience?
No, I have not, although it's very interesting. I think there's a possibility that, and I'm not a theorist in this, but that dreams don't want to be recorded. The more I'm involved with dream recording and the times I'm more focused on it, the worse nightmares I have. It's like my dreams do not want to be out, right? They don't want to be out. They don't want to be exposed. So I'm part of the mind or the brain or personally may be repressing that. So getting revenge for my work with recording, who knows? So that's a possibility. I think that's a very good point. You know, one thing I noticed too that was interesting is, on a side note, the work at Texas, we found that when we walk in a dream, body movement and rock, we move slower. It's like time is relative in dreams. It sort of slows down. The body movement experience, it seems normal while you're in the dream. It seems like you're walking normal. But if you measure from the outside, it's slower than it would be if you were walking in waking life.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? Because that's another one of those experiences that you do get often in nightmares, whereby you're trying to run, but you can't move fast enough. And perhaps that's a moment where that becomes kind of critically experienceable for you in some way. That's a really interesting point that you bring up there. I wonder about dreams being recorded. I love what you were suggesting about how it could help trigger dream memories, and perhaps there's a certain level of recording that can be really useful, but a kind of high definition movie version of our dreams might not. I mean, I think, you know, people have very unsavory dreams, you know, and they're sort of deeply personal, and I don't know if human beings can cope with what lies in their kind of subconscious realms, really. I'm not sure whether these things should surface into our waking reality. If you look
I mentioned in one article that recording dreams would be unleashing the unconscious onto the culture, onto the internet, right? Yeah. And is the World Wide Web ready for the unconscious? It's almost like a Nightmare on Elm Street to be unleashed. Yeah. That internal psychic mind onto the external world is sort of scary.
Reminds me of that. Is it a manga film? Is Papaya? It's called Papaya. That kind of broaches this subject. Is like a lucid dream detective who sleeps next to people to enter their dreams. Oh, Paprika, that's it. Thanks, Guy. I knew it began with a P. Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of that. The sort of fabric of time space starts tearing. And yeah, I mean, one thing that you brought up there that I really loved is this idea of time slowing down, and the fact that when we're recording dream speech, you're also vocalizing the speech from other characters in the dream. I find that fascinating because one of the things I observe in lucid dreams is I get this sense that you are no longer a kind of embodied avatar. You are the entire fabric of the dream, and time seems to not necessarily slow down, but expand to mean that you have multiple perspectives of any given scene. So, you know, like you can see with your own eyes, but you can, you know, I've noticed things like you can see close up and far away at the same time. You can have multiple perspectives. So it's an enormous amount of information that these dream recording devices would be trying to make sense of. And the experience within a dream isn't necessarily a linear trajectory. It's more of a kind of multi-dimensional experience of place and time and personhood. So what an amazing project. But it's very interesting you say that you think that your unconscious is seeking revenge upon you for trying to record dreams.
Yeah, and I'm not really sure what's going on, but it's almost like and I don't know if this would be true for everybody, but it's almost like the unconscious does not want to be out there. It does not want to be, you know, exposed to the external world or something. I don't know, you know.
Amazing. Well, I
Yeah,
guess it's the unconscious for
yeah,
a reason, isn't it?
yeah. So I think I have another question up there. I see
Yeah,
a
Zoe
hand.
says, whether or not we unleash the unconscious is already an active principle in our world, in our lives. It is us. So maybe it's time to face ourselves.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Well, I think there's aspects of that. You know, it's obviously really good to face your, you know, shadow aspects in your dreams. That can feel really healing. But there is some, you know, potentially an unnecessary amount of exploration and experimentation, you know, especially as children, you're testing boundaries. You don't want to get too attached to things that occur in a dream, because I think very often there's this sort of immorality, and there's this disregard for normal ethical behavior that occurs in dreams. So yeah, I don't know, I think as you grow up, you kind of you fine tune who you are, and you become perhaps more coherent between your waking self and your dreaming self. Anyone have any other questions for Daniel?
I think we have a couple hands
Oh,
raised.
yeah, Zoe, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, certainly. I think you mentioned something at the very beginning about dream to dream communication or something like that. Do you want to talk more about that, please? And thank you.
Yeah, actually that could probably be a whole nother demonstration, but basically it was hooking two people sleeping in different places up to EEG that were streaming to a website, and using some of the concept of dream incorporation, using red light bulbs in both places, so that, you know, images or lights or sounds can come into a dream and become part of the story. So the website would determine when both of them are dreaming. It would send a signal to a red light of the first dreamer, which comes into a dream. In this case, the dreamer was on a cruise ship and they saw a big flare going off. And they remembered that was a cue for them to say hello to the other dreamer. So they did the eye movement thing like they do in lucid dreams, right? So they're basically saying hello. This eye movement detection goes back to the website. And if the other person is also dreaming, because it's measuring both of them are dreaming at the same time, the website, it gets the eye movement and then sends the signal to the other dreamer, making their red light go on by their bed. In this case, the second dreamer was in a theater, movie theater. The exit sign was flashing red, and she realized that was a hello from the first dreamer on the cruise ship. So she got basically a hello message going from one dream inside the dream to another person inside their dream. Very simple, but it's still communication, right?
Yeah,
Dream to
that's
dream.
incredible.
Yeah, yeah, very simple, but it's very basic principles, you know, as far as principles of eye movements, dream incorporation, you know, that kind of stuff. It's just leveraging a common website where the data is streaming from both dreamers, and the logic of the website can determine when they're both dreaming, and when one sends a signal to send it to the other person's bedroom, and, you know, hopefully it incorporated their dream, and they'll realize that it was a message from the other dream.
How fascinating. So
Yeah.
how about this dream communication that occurs between an observer and someone dreaming, where the observer is perhaps talking to the person dreaming, and that dreamer experiences that speech as kind of emanating from maybe like a radio or a TV within the dream, and then can communicate what was said back to the observer?
Yeah, and I did the research. I wasn't involved with that, like Northwestern and the Donders in the Netherlands. A few in Paris, I think they had like 3 or 4 institutions involved, and they were able to ask questions of the dreamer and the dream, and and the dreamer could respond. You know, like even doing some math, I think, or whatever. But basically, it's easy to get stuff into a dream, and it doesn't always come in the way you intended because it's incorporated into the story.
Yeah.
But it's hard to get stuff out of the dream. You can either move your eyes, or if you have EMG sensors on your wrist, you could squeeze your hands, right? Like a Morse code, you know, you could, but, or if you using dream recording, then you could have the sensors. And if we get to the point where it's very good for speech reconstruction, you know, the dream speech reconstruction, then the dreamer, the subject in the dream could actually reply by talking, and then the sensors and the software will convert that to audio. But right now, we don't have a lot of good ways to communicate from out a dream. But you are correct. Those experiments have shown that you could influence somebody's dream and basically communicate them with sights or sounds or lights, or, you know, and that they can respond back in a very basic ways.
Great. Jen, would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, I already asked my question. Sorry, I think my hand's still up. Yeah. Oh, actually, I do have a question. I mean, now with generative AI, we didn't talk about generative AI, and that, of course, has made such waves in the ability to, you know, prompt large language models to churn out images, you know, through DALL-E, Dream AI, countless other services. Any thoughts on how that might change the game?
Well, I think it definitely will, and I just think that the key there is to get into the data sets, the volume of data, you know, from brain activity recordings or EMG recordings to be large enough so that the AI can do its predictions. You know what I mean? Because that's what is really good at, predicting what comes next, or predicting the patterns, you know, the brain patterns that map to different images or sounds or body movements or whatever. But I think that's really going to become, AI is going to have quite a bit of involvement.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I'm doing now is I'm just taking some key messages from my dreams, and I'm using image generators to create some kind of visualization. That's just a way for me to sort of do that myself. And I found that to be really helpful in helping add new dimensions to the dream messages. So I would recommend people try that. It's pretty fun, and I'm doing it.
What did you inputted, like a part of your dream story, you mean? Or?
Yes. Yep. Oh. So I basically prompt it with the key message. I usually take the key message, or sometimes I'll take a dream element that's not familiar to me, and I'll describe it, and then I'll see what comes up. Like one time I had a dream that involved a map or a flag, and so I described the flag, and it popped up to be an Aboriginal territory flag, which was actually like a real thing. So it was very interesting. So I find it to be helpful.
I think so. There is a new app that's in beta. I think it's called Dream Field.
Okay.
Casey something, and it uses AI. You input your main image or whatever, right, or something, and it uses the AI model and actually creates a dream story from what you told it. You know what I mean? Similar to what you're talking about. You know.
Interesting. I'm looking at the field and I don't see it.
Yeah, it's I think it's called Dream Field. Casey Atherbury or something. I can always send it to Sarah if she has a way to communicate.
That'd be great. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, Daniel, I mean, considering you're now saying that you reckon the unconscious doesn't let out, and maybe you shouldn't be doing dream recording. What got you into dream recording in the first instance?
Well, I guess it's sort of like going to the moon. I had about 10 years ago, I had read that that group in Japan had were able to capture imagery just from the brain, reconstruct the imagery that people had viewed while they were awake, and had just brought up as a memory, right? And that they could reconstruct that fairly accurately. And I thought, well, if you can do that with imagined imagery, you could probably do it with dreams, right?
Yeah.
And and they went on to do it with dream imagery too. But and then it also occurred to me that if you could reconstruct mental visual imagery, you should be able to reconstruct speech. You know, because I was already aware of the early research of correspondence of speech in dreams, conversations in dreams with speech muscles. I was aware of that from 30 years ago. So I realized, well, you should be able to reconstruct dream speech. And if you have dream visual imagery and dream speech, you ought to be able to reconstruct dream body movement, right? Using either electromyography or near infrared on brain activity. There's a couple of different ways to do that. But you ought to be able to sort of capture most of the picture, most of the dream story, not the emotions, of course, and not yet the surrounding sounds like hearing music in your dream or something, but some of the basic stuff.
You mentioned the music thing, because that's a big thing. I know a lot of musicians that hear melodies, hear music in their dreams, and then they wake up and they try to record it. And I know that it's now possible to kind of reconstruct a piece of music when someone's listening to it. So it seems like that's probably not far off dream-wise, which is going to be pretty incredible. I remember, have you ever seen the film Brainstorm?
Natalie Wood, yeah.
It was one of my favorite films as a teenager, and that's about a woman who invents a machine that can record your memories, and you can wear it and play it back. And I think that was part of my inspiration for this idea about dream recording. I kind of feel like there are no doubt going to be some nefarious applications of this, depending on how good it gets. And the idea that you mentioned of it turning into a kind of pre-crime situation is rather scary, because I think our dreams are there so that people can act out fantasies that they'd never want to really do in real life. So it kind of goes to show how obsessed we are with being awake these days, in a way, doesn't it? That we even want to bring dreams into the waking world, because one of the things I find most fascinating about dreaming is the sort of very nature of this other world that you can inhabit when you dream, and the fact that quite often in dreams I have this sense of remembering other dream lives. So I kind of think there's probably too much there. I don't know whether even AI can cope with the amount of information that's going to be coming through dreaming, because
it's a challenge. It is. And there's even questions that are related to religion too. People in historically have dreamt of angels, seeing angels, right? And so you put angels on YouTube, and you record somebody's dream. How's that work? You know what I mean? Now you're actually watching angels. Is that really what you're watching? You know what I mean? It gets really, it crosses quite a few lines, It explores quite a few borders. You know what I mean? It's sort of scary and sort of fascinating. It's like, going to Mars, there's a lot of risks there, but people are driven to go into outer space, and some of us are driven to go into inner space of dreams,
Well, on that subject, I wonder about something like Elon Musk's Neuralink, and whether or not that could be something that might be employed for dream recording at some point, because that is like incredibly advanced and tiny wearable tech that is creating a computer brain interface. So I wonder whether a device, an implantable device like that, might be the future of dream recording.
Well, at Northwestern, the Moran Cerf has done some recording of dream content through implantable electrodes, and he claims he was able to determine, like, if you dreamed of your mother, but you couldn't tell what kind of dress she was wearing. In other words, you couldn't get that down to that detail.
Well, if it was a dream, it was probably naked, in which case you might not want to remember it.
Yeah, right. But I have been focusing on anything that's non-invasive and non-implantable, because the only way we're going to get into the home is not by going into somebody, into their skull. So
no, people are getting more and more willing to be invaded these days, though, aren't they? I mean, you mentioned earlier, is it Michael Rodriguez in Russia who implanted his own device by drilling into his own head? Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, yeah, he was trying to, I think, do some kind of lucid induction or whatever, and he did his own, what they call it, trepidation or whatever, where you drill right into his head, and supposedly he got some interesting results, but he had to go to the hospital. I think he had an infection or whatever. So that was a little bit extreme. And right now, Neuralink, for example, is only doing it with they got approval for patients that have a brain injuries that can't communicate normally. So they want to map those speech areas to a computer where a person could just think, speak and thinking, and the computer would actually. One of his co-founders for Neuralink was associated with our little group that we had that was interested in recording, but her expertise was pretty much wasn't implantable. So I'm focused much more on wearable stuff if we can.
Yeah. Well, does anyone have any other questions? Because it's morning in California, isn't it, Daniel? So you're not getting ready to go to bed, although you do have a cold, so I don't want to keep you for too much.
No, I'm fine. If somebody had more questions, I'm not in any big hurry, so I'll just leave it up to.
So tell us what you're going to do now. What's your next move?
Well, I think I still have quite an interest in because it's much easier than like the MRI and stuff, but the electromyography on body movement in dreams, right? On motor behavior in dreams. So I've measured people, for example, on their legs, and you could predict they were dancing in the dream, and they would say, "Oh yeah, I was dancing." You know what I mean? So you can detect a movement. I'm curious in when people fly in dreams, whether it's a lucid dream or not, what is the body doing? In other words, are your arms waving, or how do are you floating or kicking? You know what I mean? Jumping.
Have you had any insight into that yet?
No, I don't. But it's one experiment I would like to do before too long. Is just if we can get a lucid dreamer, probably always a good subject because they can sort of control sometimes what they do, right? A lucid dreamer fly, and then we'll see what their body muscles are doing, and see what we can map that to a graphical avatar, and watch the avatar, float around or wave their hands or whatever the method the person uses to fly.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, to me, the experience of flying is very much like that expanded time where it's less you are an individual entity flying through something and more you are the entire world, and you're the air that lifts your body up at the same time somehow as well.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And I'm also very interested in moving on with speech recognition, because I think if a person can speak, they could actually give you a tour of their dream.
Yeah.
They could talk to you, say, okay, now I'm going into this forest and I see a house over there, and I'm going to walk up and I'm opening the door, right? And so narrating their dream, if we can get that dream speech recognition.
I guess that narration and that awareness within the dream, knowing that you're being observed, also then influences how that dream unfolds. Like you were saying, the observer to dream communication, I imagine that whatever information is fed into that dream then dictates how the dream proceeds.
Well, I'm sure it does. Yeah, it's all interconnected. What's going on around the sleeping person, in the room, the incorporation of external audio or visual, and the content of the dream, and the memories of your past all get wound together there, and of course all the other mythical aspects of dreams that you've been involved with, Sarah. And
well, it's really interesting to hear, about your research on this, and then think about ancient perceptions of dreaming as well. Like the other day we had Vasilis Adratas, who was talking about indigenous Australian dreaming, and the belief there that your soul leaves your body when you dream, and it's dangerous. That moment of waking up or that moment of falling asleep is a risky time period. So, you know, in an ancient Mesopotamia, in ancient Egypt, you get this idea that dreams are something that exist outside of yourself and they come upon you. So it's fascinating to look at this idea of dream recording with that kind of recognition and appreciation for how dreams have been perceived throughout time and are still perceived very differently in certain places.
Yeah, and I think even those type of dreams and also precognitive dreams, it would be great. You record your dream and then see if it happens in real life.
Yeah.
And you could go back and say, you know, you tell people now, well, I dreamt this 3 days ago, right? Whatever you're doing. And they go, yeah, right. You're just making up. And you say, let's go look at the video, right?
Yeah, be like CCTV, like dream CCTV.
Yeah. There's another question. I think a hand still up, maybe.
Jen, is your hand still up from last time, or is it a new hand up?
She may have dropped off.
I think that's the old hand up. Well, if there's no other questions, I will let you go, Daniel, so you can have a recuperative afternoon nap. And I hope that you have very sweet dreams. And I don't know, maybe the dreaming for you is somewhere where you can ask your dreams whether or not it's a good idea to be recording them or not. And if not, why not? I'd be interested to know that.
But, you know, I work with the state of California Health Services is what I work with. And I work with the mental health area and also substance use disorders. And I'm surprised how little in California, at least in the clinical field, how little dreams have been used in the past, you know, as far as your methods of treatments. Of course, you got like cognitive behavioral therapy and all this stuff. You know, I hope that dreams become more valued and part of a total personality therapy and analysis, you know. So I hope to see them get more, and I hope the dream recording excites people and thinking about dreams just in general. The more you get interested in dreams, the more you remember them, of course.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more with that. And I think that, you know, it's something that you see in the ancient world. Dreams were absolutely considered a vital part of health. If you had nightmares, it was considered that they could shorten your life, and good, auspicious, divine dreams could potentially heal you. And provide you contact with divine beings, actual physical, spontaneous faith healing responses. And I think that it's underestimated how influential dreams can be. The reason why I got into doing the work that I do is because when I had a new baby 15 years ago, I could hardly sleep, and my dream life just kind of tailed off. And I'd always been a avid lucid dreamer up until that point, so I was devastated by it. And it really made me appreciate just how much positive, good dreaming can be life enriching and make you feel yourself, make you feel content, satisfied, give you an overview, be an amazing, creative, expressive realm. And I think that, you know, everyone knows that if you wake up from a bad dream, you feel terrible for a while. And you know that if you wake up from an amazing dream, you feel amazing for a while. So especially looking at situations like mental health issues, addiction and stuff like that, I think a little bit more consideration of trying to incubate positive dreams and happy dreams could really change people's lives. Because, you know, my theory about dreams is that you build your personality in dreams, perhaps more than waking life. And babies spend an inordinate amount of time in REM. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it's because they're constructing their idea of the world and their place in time and space. And you're constructing your personality all the time. Your dreamscape becomes a kind of psychic landscape or architecture for, you know, your true self. So I think dreams are vitally important. And I think you're right. I think that dream recording is a kind of thing that would interest and fascinate people these days. And as you say, it may be one of those things, a bit like virtual reality. I think virtual reality has that capacity to sort of accidentally get people interested in dreaming, because it's been shown that virtual reality gamers are more likely to have lucid dreams. And I think that's because using headsets, you're kind of doing this daily entrainment of looking into this imaginal world in a way that you don't when you're looking at flat screens and devices. So I think, you know, recording dreams is something that's going to captivate people and interest people and hopefully make people value their dreams.
Well, I actually tried an experiment. This was a strange one. Sleeping with a VR headset on. So these are the early years. I had one of these Oculus, I think it was called, Oculus Quest. But the early beta models, really, years and years ago. I thought, this is not going to be comfortable. I'm just going to wear this, and I'm going to play this early prototype called the Italian Villa, I think it is, where in the VR game you walked around this villa and you could explore the house or go outside, whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then I had some other VRs I tested with, like flying over mountains. So I actually went to sleep wearing these, and it was really strange. I would wake up sometimes and I'm like flying over a mountain, right? And sometimes I would dream of waking up flying over the mountain, but I'm still dreaming, and the mountain changes different than the VR. But the most interesting one I was running the Italian villa, sleeping with it.
Yeah.
And I started dreaming of being in an actual Italian villa. And I remember the VR game is running in the headset, but I'm sleeping, right? And in the dream, I'm exploring this Italian villa, and I see a man. He looks like my dad, who had died long before that. He was all dressed in black, and he was sitting on the sofa in the middle of this big living room with a fireplace in the Italian villa, similar to the game, but different. This is because this is in my dream. But this person in the dream sitting on the sofa was wearing an Oculus Quest headset themselves. The dream character had an Oculus Quest. So this is my dream while I'm sleeping with the VR thing running, right? So in the dream, I walk over to him. He says, "Dan, you got to try this. This is amazing, this VR stuff." So in the dream, I put on the headset in the dream, excuse me. And in the dream headset, you know, I'm dreaming of my bedroom when I'm actually sleeping.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
I went full circle.
Wow, that's
and I'm dreaming of the bedroom. And then I finally woke up for real. And of course, the VR game is still playing on the headset. I'm laying on my side, and you know, my neck is about half twisted around. And so I'm back in the VR. I lost track of what was real, what was the real bedroom, what was the real villa. I was, for a couple of minutes, I was just so disoriented. I didn't know if I was still in the game or I was dreaming of the game.
Did this have like a soundtrack to it as well?
Oh, it should have, though. It should have. I wrote it up. It's out there in my academia.
I do think that sound can really influence dream content. I used to have my alarm set to like a 50s radio station, and those songs would always work their way into my dreams. And another thing that I'm really interested in is the potential for olfaction to be used as dream memory triggers. I've got a theory that, say, for example, you were to use the aftershave of a lover or perfume of a lover while someone was sleeping, that would trigger a memory of that person, because obviously the olfaction centers in the brain are so close to the memory centers of the brain, and people like often have very vivid memory recall when they smell something. I think that it's underestimated just how much the environment influences dream contact and how much information we're picking up all the time when we are dreaming.
Yeah, I think quite a bit, actually. I think it influences quite a bit. A lot of experiments going on about those kind of things, and they are very interesting. So if no more questions, then thanks to everybody for joining, and good luck at your in-person conference in Athens, your Dream Palace.
Thank you so much, Daniel. That was brilliant. Just great to hear all about this research. Really fantastic presentation. Thank you very much. And thank you to everyone for joining us as well.
Thank you, and have a good day to everybody.
Yeah. Good night, everyone. Good afternoon, Daniel. See you soon. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.